Let me tell you what my deep research and basically vision is.
I hope there's Bigfoot. I don't think there is.
I'm not telling you nothing.
The aliens won't let it happen. Happening now, breaking.
Bernie Sanders is angry.
Bears beats Battlestar Galactica.
What are the tips? Give me some tips on how to work with Wes Anderson.
Be ready to speak very fast and very clearly, because that's definitely one key thing.
I will only tell the truth.
Until you and 6 kids you barely know in wet bathing suits have surrounded 9 chimpanzees outside of a Wendy's. You probably really don't know yourself, okay?
Yep. And we back.
Hello and welcome. You're listening to your new favorite podcast and the best in political, sports, and paranormal news coverage. I'm your host, Wes Anderson, and this is In the Shed. This is episode 28, so whether you're back for more or finding us for the first time this week, hey, thanks for tuning in. It is early Friday morning, November 12th, and I am in a shed in the backyard of my home in Alabama. Also, I can hang out with you tools and talk about the latest headlines, stories, and rumors in the world of politics, sports, and the paranormal. So one of my favorite sports has made a return, and that is college basketball with the season tipping off. We're going to save that conversation for next week in the world of sports. But the beginning of the college basketball season also marks one of my favorite personal traditions. If you have listened to the show before, you know that in the realm of college sports, there are a couple of teams that I root for: the Auburn Tigers and the Kentucky Wildcats. Auburn because my father is an Auburn fan and I was raised right. And Kentucky because my mama grew up, at least for part of her childhood, in the great state of Kentucky. And I've got family there to this day. And we are on the right side of things for the most part, other than my Uncle Rob and Cousin Derek, who root for Louisville. But the rest of us, we pull for Kentucky. So whether it's football season, basketball season, or whatever, those are the teams that I keep up with the most closely and root for the hardest. And I'm a 32-year-old man, but something that happens at the beginning of every basketball season is that I get a Kentucky basketball schedule in the mail from none other than my Memaw. And y'all know Memaw. She's America's Memaw now, probably India's Memaw now. I talk about her on the show, and I end every episode of the show with Memaw, we made it, because my Memaw is that cool. And I can't even remember, to be honest with you, when she started sending me a schedule, but I remember as a small child on her refrigerator in her home in Mississippi, there would be a Kentucky basketball schedule hanging up right there, and after every game, she would put a smiley face beside the game if they won, or a frowny face if they lost. And at some point in time, a younger version of myself must have inquired as to how I myself would find a Kentucky basketball schedule. So at some point in time, my Memaw started mailing me a schedule every single year, and she still does it to this day, even though I have moved countless times. It's almost like Santa Claus. And this year, Kentucky was getting ready to tip off against Coach K and Duke, starting off the Coach K farewell tour. Good riddance to you, sir. And I realized that I had not yet gotten my schedule in the mail. And I thought, this is it. This is the year. This is the year that I'm not going to get my schedule. And yeah, I could go print off a schedule of my own. And sure, I could pull up the schedule on my cell phone and look at what games they have coming up and what the results of those games are. But that is not how I do things, my babies. That's not what I'm expecting, my tools. No, I get the schedule mailed to me by my Memaw. I take it out of the envelope. I put it on the refrigerator right next to her picture, right next to my grandpa's picture. And then every time there's a game played, your boy puts a smiley face or a frowny face along with a record. And I was a little bit sad, if I'm being honest, a little bit disappointed. Understand, life happens, things have been crazy and busy. Maybe Memaw forgot. Maybe she just ain't get around to it this time. maybe I'm gonna have to let some things go. But alas, the very next day, in the mail, was my Kentucky basketball schedule. I'm happy to report that the tradition is alive. And right underneath the picture of my Memaw smoking a fat cigar, and right beside the picture of me and my grandpa chucking the deuces at my college graduation, is the 2021-2022 Kentucky basketball schedule. Unfortunately, I had to put a sad face next to it because we lost to Duke. But I liked a lot of what I saw. And the thing I like the most is that I get to keep up with it on my refrigerator. I have a terrific Memaw. I'm just saying. I guess if you haven't picked up on it yet, 28 episodes in, I tend to be a little bit of a nostalgic guy. I've got a sensitive side. I put a lot of value on family traditions, on doing things together, being a part of each other's lives. I've made a vow now that I have children that I will do my best to never live vicariously through them. Not through athletics, not academically, and not socially. In no regard do I plan to live vicariously through my children because I've got my own thing going, mostly in India. But I did decide to embrace the nostalgia with my daughter, with my 5-year-old, who has been on the show. Check out the episode about dinosaurs. She was fantastic. Best guest we've ever had. And I decided to introduce my daughter. You know, she likes the cartoons. I wanted to introduce her to a cartoon that I enjoyed when I was her age. My favorite superhero as a child, Captain Planet. Earth, wind, water, fire, heart, together we form Captain Planet. Captain Planet and the Planeteers, a group of teenagers with special rings that give them powers. And when they put those powers together, it forms a blue superhero with a mullet who fights against the evils of corporate greed that's trying to ruin our planet. And I was looking for some way to stream this cartoon because I figure with all the things that we have, you know, Hulu and Amazon TV and YouTube TV and all the resources at our fingertips, it had to be streaming somewhere. And it is. I found it on either Hulu or Amazon Prime. I do not remember which. It is not important unless you want to watch it. I had to pay in order to view the whole season. So, for nostalgia's sake, I dropped $23. And maybe that sounds like a lot to you, but hey, I got it like that. I could spend $23 to have a moment with my daughter. And I had forgotten how much of the premise of this show was really environmentalism disguised as a children's TV show. Like, it was a little bit of propaganda that I did not realize at the time. But, you know, I want to take care of the planet too, so I guess that's all right. And also, side note, I had no idea that Ted Turner played such a role in my childhood because I went to Turner Field to watch the Braves play. My favorite superhero was Captain Planet, and I watched a lot of old movies on TBS. It turns out Ted Turner was basically like my second grandfather, so that's something. And so I turned on Captain Planet. I described the show to my 5-year-old. We watch a whole episode together. And I say to her, do you want to watch another one? Isn't that great? And she's like, nah. I'm like, what do you mean, nah? Like, don't you want to turn the Planeteers? It's really cool. Do you want to watch another episode with your dad? And she says, can't we just watch Vampirina instead? You try to raise them right. Now my wife like, why you drop $23 for a season of a cartoon that she don't even want to watch? But that's okay, because when everybody else go to bed, I'ma watch Captain Planet. All right, enough of that. Let's get to some comments and corrections from our last episode. Keystone 275, Hanobia 254, Townsend 169. Yeah, we're still doing that. We continue to grow our community on Twitter, YouTube, and across all major podcast platforms. Please remember to subscribe and review and follow us on social media. If you're listening to this, our 28th episode, you are not alone. These dulcet tones are being heard in 15 countries across the globe right now. We continue to grow in India, which now makes up almost 26% of our listening audience, followed by France, the good people in the UK, and our friends down under. I also want to give a special shout out to those in Brazil, our 7 new listeners there this week. Hey, welcome to the family, Brazil. On last week's show, I talked about a friend that surprised me immensely by eating the whole shrimp while at lunch, even the tails. So we put up a poll on Twitter. You can follow us there at InTheShed4, and we asked, have you ever known anyone who, when eating shrimp, also ate the tails? At our time of recording, 65% of you say no, never, but shockingly, 35% of you say yes, I have. And since publishing episode 27 of the podcast, even I have found an additional one of my friends that also eats the shrimp tails. I guess I stand somewhat corrected, and I'm amazed. On our last episode, I covered the Virginia gubernatorial election in which Republican Glenn Youngkin was elected. And by the way, why is it called gubernatorial? I was just thinking about this. You would think the word would be governatorial because it's the governor. I guess we know that sometimes we elect some goobers because it's a gubernatorial election. Anyway, I neglected to say that in addition to Mr. Youngkin's win, Republican Winsome Sears was also elected as the state's lieutenant governor, becoming the first woman of color to hold the position in the state. Congratulations to her. And on last week's show, I said there were around 10 companies working to bring back the woolly mammoth. I have since found out that number is closer to 25. Who knew the return of the woolly mammoth was such a global priority? That's all the comments and corrections this week. We've got a great show for you today, but first let's get to some listener emails. Our first email comes to us from Bert from Texas. No, I'm just kidding. Bert's probably going to not email the show again. Our first email comes from Marcus from Virginia, who writes, Wes, I thought your analysis of what happened in Virginia was fair and mostly correct, but also a bit simplistic. Yes, the Democrats need to run better candidates and learn some self-awareness, but I think they actually lost because they ran a candidate who wasn't progressive enough. Terry McAuliffe is a Clinton Democrat. Even if he uses different language, we know who he is and we've seen how he governs. The fact is, very few Virginians had faith that he would enact the policies he espoused or that he would keep the promises he made. Hey, Marcus, I appreciate you listening to the show, and I appreciate your thoughts. Being that you are from Virginia, I will take your word for that. I don't really know how Terry McAuliffe is perceived in the state other than that he did not win the election, and I appreciate your perspective. Samantha from North Carolina writes, Wes, my son has Down syndrome. I'm so thankful for your kind words and coverage of where Down syndrome got its name. It's an important thing for people to know. I'm glad that you enjoyed that, Samantha. We try to do that from time to time on the show. In addition to current events, we like to throw in a bit of history that we find to be important or relevant, and I thought that was a remarkable and positive story. It corrected some of my thinking, and I hope it did for others who have heard that episode as well. All best to you and your son. Thank you for listening to the show. And finally, Ty from Georgia writes, thanks to you, I watched Becky. I mostly regret it. I did recommend that movie, but I also in my review gave it a 2.8 stars out of 5. And I told you that this was a movie full of gore and violence. And if you needed a movie that had a very robust plot line, this was probably not for you. So apparently, Ty, you fit into that category. Category. Those words confuse me. But I'm sorry that you didn't enjoy the movie. We enjoyed the movie. I'm sorry that you did not, Ty. I will try to do better for you in the future. That's all the listener emails this week. If you have any thoughts that you'd like to share, you can email the show at intheshedwithwes@gmail.com. Again, that's intheshedwithwes@gmail.com. I might even read it on air. All right, enough of that. Let's switch to this. Let's get to the news in the world of politics, and let's hit the headlines. U.S. experiencing shortage of 100-plus drugs, including Narcan and insulin, as record amounts of fentanyl flows across southern border, writes Infowars.com. Pennsylvania Department of Health refuses to provide full COVID-19 death data, according to the Epoch Times. Qatar agrees to represent U.S. interests in Taliban-led Afghanistan, says Axios. From the Washington Post, 4.4 million Americans quit their jobs in September, breaking records set in August. And finally, election setbacks embolden Dems to go YOLO on Biden agenda, and that is according to the Daily Beast. Our first story in the world of politics, shock poll, Biden approval down to 38%, Kamala Harris support craters to 28%. The approval ratings for President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris have reached dismal new lows, according to a stunning just-released poll. In a survey published Sunday by USA Today, the president's approval rating stands at just 38%. According to USA Today, that's the lowest number they've ever recorded for a president at this point in his term, with the exception of Biden's predecessor, Donald Trump. Notably, independents by a 7-1 margin believe that the president has done a worse job than they thought he would. The vice president fared equally poor in a new poll. USA Today found that just 28% of those surveyed approve of Kamala Harris at the moment. In all, 51% disapprove of the vice president's job performance, and 21% are undecided. The poll was taken Wednesday through Friday, so it does not factor in any bounce the administration may have received from the passage of the infrastructure package. That said, there was little good news to be found for Democrats. If the election were held now, according to the survey, 46% would vote for their local Republican congressional candidate compared to only 38% who said that they would back their Democratic option. And only 29% approve of congressional Democrats compared to 35% for their Republican counterparts. So, President Biden's approval rating, according to this poll by USA Today, has cratered to 38%, with his vice president's approval rating standing at 28%. And I know just for covering this, for bringing this up, I'm going to be getting some emails talking about how I am MAGA, I'm a Trump supporter. I even had some lady on Twitter this week that was coming at me talking about how she doubted my claim that I did not vote for Donald Trump. And I'm like, hey, have you ever listened to the show? Like, listen to my show and you will see that I am not a Trump supporter and I'm not a Biden supporter. I am an American, but I'm a registered independent. And I happen to believe that every president does some things that are good and every president does some things that are bad. And as I have said a million times in 28 episodes, I think, just my opinion, I think that we need both the left wing and the right wing for this bald eagle to soar, okay? I think that we are on the same team, that we need to get rid of some of the partisanship that has started to manifest in destructive ways in our political landscape. But if you are a Democratic strategist, or if you are someone who voted for Joe Biden, for his administration, you have to be alarmed at these numbers, that this early into his presidency, his numbers have sank this low, because 38% is not good. And in the article, it said the only person that had a worse approval rating at this point in the presidency was Donald Trump. So maybe you can try and spin it. But if we're being honest, no matter how you slice it, 38% is not a good thing for Democrats who hold a majority in both the Senate and the House, and who have the White House, and who are hoping to avoid disaster when the midterms come around. And I don't know a whole lot. I'm just a guy in Alabama in his shed. But I find this to be a very interesting turn of events, because largely Joe Biden was elected because people were tired, in my view, were tired of the chaos that came with a Donald Trump presidency. They were tired of the mean tweets. They were tired of the seeming instability. They were tired of the revolving door on his cabinet. And we were in the middle of a pandemic that was hurting our economy, in which people were losing lives, in which people were afraid and were scared. And the idea of a Joe Biden presidency seemed more palatable to people because it was supposed to bring some stability and some normalcy and even some predictability, some boringness. People people wanted boring. They were ready for some boring. And you could argue that Joe Biden has brought the boring, but so far he hasn't brought a lot else that people can point to. He did just get the infrastructure bill passed finally, so it will be interesting to see what happens with his numbers once that starts taking effect. Will that give him a bump in these polls? The latest jobs report had some very good numbers, and Wall Street seems to be doing okay. But for your average American, for your average middle class or lower American, Wall Street doing well doesn't mean a whole lot to us because, hey, we ain't got many investments there, if any investments there. And the job report, that's good news, but it don't mean a whole lot if you're working 2 or 3 jobs, or if the job that you have doesn't pay a living wage, or if you're unable to afford health care, or if you're living in an area where 2 years into this pandemic, you're still having to send your child to school wearing a mask, or you're having to show proof of vaccination in order to enter a restaurant to use the bathroom, when less than 1% of people who contract COVID-19 are even hospitalized. Less than 1%. You can look that up. I would love to see the numbers of who these pollsters contacted. Where do these people live? What is their political affiliation? What does the breakdown look like? Do we believe that these numbers are accurate? Every president does some negative things. Every president does some positive things. And the Biden administration so far has certainly had its struggles and has had a hard time in a lot of ways finding their footing. And we've covered some of those difficult moments and some of those stumbles on this show. And we've also pointed out some things that they've done that we appreciate and that we think are valuable. But I wonder, who did they poll? And what effect will this have moving forward in the midterm elections? Will the fact that Joe Biden is the president and Kamala Harris is the vice president, will that help or will that hurt these congressional candidates? Will these numbers truly bounce back with the passage of the infrastructure plan and as COVID numbers continue to go down nationally and more people become vaccinated? Will his approval ratings bounce back? And if not, then what are the Democrat leadership, what are they going to do when the presidential election comes around again? Can you really run a president and a vice president on your ticket again who are putting forth such weak approval numbers, especially if you lose seats in the House or the Senate? I think probably Democratic leadership at this point is probably hoping and probably praying that in 2024, Donald Trump decides to run for president again and is able to secure the Republican nomination. Because outside of Trump trying to get back into the White House, I don't know who the Republicans could run that you would like your chances against with the Biden and Harris ticket at this point. And I'm not even saying that Biden would for sure beat Trump. I don't know. That would remain to be unseen how things shake out between now and then. But I think at least in that circumstance, Democrats would like their chances. But if the Republican Party moves on, can you really run Joe Biden and Kamala Harris? Kamala Harris is at 29% approval. How is that even possible? How can there be that many people that despise somebody? Like, this got me wondering, what is my approval rating? Like, I might be, if she at 29 and he at 38, I might be at like 14.5%. Except for in India. Thank you, Ramesh. Shout out to my favorite country. But I think we're going to do our own poll. And if you're not already following us on Twitter, find us on Twitter at InTheShed4, because we're going to do our own poll. I'm curious to see what responses will be. And I'm going to put it up for a week. And I'm going to try to get 1,000 votes. That's our goal. We might only get 100. We might get 150. We might get 17. I don't know. But I'm going to aim big for 1,000 votes. And I'm just going to ask for your simple feedback. Do you approve of the job that Joe Biden has done so far? Do you approve of the job that Kamala Harris has done so far? So find us on Twitter. Follow us if you're not already. And share this poll. Retweet it. Vote in the poll. We're going to try to get 1,000 votes. I'm curious to see what our numbers would look like. We have a good representation, I feel like. People follow us and listen to the show that are Donald Trump supporters. People follow us and listen to the show that are President Biden supporters. And we got everybody in between. 38%. That is not a good percentage, not a good look for Joe Biden and the Democrats. And it will be interesting to see what happens moving forward. Our second story in the world of politics, missing man joined search party for himself. A Turkish man reported missing in a forest ended up joining the search operation for himself, according to a mind-bending new report. And that's the only kind of reports we have on this show, my babies. Mind-bending reports. Bayan Mutlu, 50 years old, who lives in the northwestern Bursa province and also has a ballin' name, was believed to be missing Tuesday after he wandered away drunk in the forest from his group of friends. With search efforts underway, Mutlu ended up joining a group of volunteers who were helping authorities look for him. But when the volunteers began shouting his name, Mutlu became confused and asked who they were trying to locate. "I am right here," he reportedly told them. Once police learned the man joined his own search party, they gave him a ride home, the outlet reports. Yo, this story is hilarious and crazy. My man Bayan Mutlu, 50 years old, out in the forest with his buddies. What are they doing in the forest? I don't know. We can only speculate. Apparently doing some drinking in the forest. And Bayan either had too much to drink or does not hold his liquor well, and wanders off from the group. And they launch a search party. Imagine for a minute. Put yourself in my shoes. I'm lost in the forest, separated from my friends. And all of a sudden I see a group of people searching for somebody. And I'm like, hey, I want to help out. That's the right thing to do. I'm a good citizen. And then I hear them yelling, Wes, where are you? They were talking about some Bayan, where are you? He was like, hey, they're yelling my name. They're searching for someone with my name. I don't know if that's a common name in Turkey. I don't know. But they yelling some Bayan. And he like, who is it that you're looking for? And they're like, some guy named Bayan Mutlu that went missing with his friends. And he's like, well, here I am. That had to have been the most fun search party. Usually when search parties go out looking for somebody, it does not result in a good situation or good circumstances. A lot of times, it is a very sad situation and circumstance. You trying to find somebody that may have been hurt or injured or abducted or killed. But in this circumstance, you find 50-year-old Bayan Mutlu, my boy, wandering through the forest. He was probably pretty surprised. Like, hey, I'm looking for myself. People say all the time, I just trying to find myself. Bayan Mutlu had a whole crew to help him, and they found him. Our next story in the world of politics, why speaking English may spread more coronavirus than some other languages. New research suggests that English speakers put more droplets into the air when they talk, which may make them more likely to spread COVID-19. Since the novel coronavirus is spread by droplets, how spitty a language is might contribute to different rates of the disease. It all comes down to something called aspirated consonants, the sounds we make that spray more droplets of saliva into the air. In college, everyone knew which professor spit the most when they lectured. That's actually true. I had one professor after the first day I no longer sat on the front row. And he was only there for a year. He was a real strange guy. Nice guy, real nice guy, but very strange. The first day of class, he was taking pictures of all the students, like right up in your face with a big old school camera. And one of the girls was like, hey, why are you doing that? And he was like, I make a slideshow of all my students so I can learn their faces. And none of us were comfortable with that premise. When a lecture was particularly boring, students might find themselves fascinated by the way the sunlight caught droplets of spit hanging in the air around the professor. That is weird. I don't think anybody's paying attention to sunlight catching droplets of... You need some hobbies, whoever wrote this. You need some hobbies. Memories of teachers who were the loud talkers is one thing, yet now we know that simply speaking English could mean we're all spitting on the people around us. We all know that coughing or sneezing spreads germs. That's how we get colds and the flu every year. That spread occurs because of coughing or sneezing projecting high-velocity droplets full of viruses from our nose and throat into the air around us. That's why we're told to cough into our elbows and wash our hands frequently, even prior to COVID-19. Then the advent of the coronavirus pandemic led to the research finding that not only coughing and sneezing, but simply talking drives aerosolized viruses into the air. That's one of the biggest reasons for the recommendation that everyone wear a mask and stay 6 feet apart. Now, it looks like not all talking leads to the same amount of droplets in the air. Instead, it could depend on which language the speaker is using. One of the first hints that there might be a difference in how viruses spread based on language came from the observations made in China. Very, very trustworthy observations coming from China, I am sure. Remarkably, this happened not during the COVID-19 pandemic, but during the first SARS outbreak in China. That virus led to over 8,000 cases recorded in 26 countries. At that time, there were far more Japanese tourists than American ones in South China, yet Americans accounted for 70 cases of SARS, and Japan had no cases at all. How could that be? At the time, one explanation by scientists had to do with languages. Since the staff of Chinese stores were generally multilingual, they typically spoke to U.S. shoppers in English while they spoke to Japanese tourists in Japanese. And that matters because English is full of aspirated consonants, while Japanese has few of them. While Japanese has few aspirated consonants leading speakers to produce little spit while talking, English has 3 of them. Specifically, the consonants P, T, and K are aspirated in English. Making those sounds throws myriad tiny droplets from the speaker's respiratory tract into the air, creating a cloud of spit. If that person is carrying a virus, the air is now full of viral particles. Up until now, the prospect of a spitty talker might be disgusting, but we never considered that it could put us at risk for a deadly disease. COVID-19 has changed all that, which is why researchers at RUDN University studied whether people who speak languages with aspirated consonants have a higher rate of the novel coronavirus infection. The study looked at data from 26 countries with more than 1,000 COVID-19 cases as of March 23rd. That's a useful window of time because that would be before mask wearing was widespread. The countries were grouped by whether the languages predominantly spoken contain aspirated consonants or not. The data included a large number of languages, including English. There were indeed more cases of coronavirus infection in countries that spoke languages with aspirated consonants. These countries showed 255 cases of COVID-19 per 1 million residents, while the countries where the languages had few aspirated consonants had 206 cases of COVID-19 per 1 million residents. Technically, these numbers did not achieve statistical significance, but the observation is interesting nonetheless. So maybe, according to this one article, the key to stopping the spread of COVID-19 is to use sign language. Because in my unscientific opinion, that is the only way to ensure the droplets do not come out of our mouths when we talk. Oh, man. I am so tired of seeing articles like this. This is not science. This is utter nonsense. To say that people who speak English are spreading COVID at higher rates because of the way that the consonants form in our mouths, we're expressing more droplets, is nothing more than a generalization and a guess. Because I'm just saying, there are probably people in every language that just happen to spit a little bit more when they talk. Don't you think? Isn't that common sense that some people are spit talkers? That some people project a little bit more when they talk? What about people with lisps? Are we going to start blaming people who have lisps spread the coronavirus more than others? Toddlers and babies and folks, they spread coronavirus more than any others. It's crazy. This is a crazy assertion to make. First of all, it does not matter if you spit when you talk when it comes to whether or not somebody gets coronavirus. You can straight up spit in somebody's mouth, and I would not be a proponent of that because it is disgusting. But you could do that, and that person would not catch coronavirus unless the person spitting has coronavirus. Not to mention that we are not taking into consideration cultural norms and practices and hygiene and health and all kinds, a host of other things, other factors here that make a difference when it comes to whether or not people contract COVID-19. Who is exposed to it the most? What is their health like? What are the cultural norms? Do they come from a culture where people naturally distance from each other, or are they more of a familial type culture, or more of a community-based culture? How do they greet each other? In close proximity or from across the room? Trying to say that people spread COVID-19 more because they speak English. It might be true that there are more of those types of consonants in our language, although you only mentioned 3 out of 26, but hey, maybe that part is true. But I've heard a whole lot of foreign languages that seem a lot harsher on the tongue, and in which the syllables are really enunciated in a way that is much more fun and lively and forceful than in our language. To me, this article is nothing more than junk science pushing some type of odd agenda, masquerading as a scientific discovery, which is not. You got people in every language that spit when they talk. You got people that over-enunciate. You got different dialects in the same language in different regions of the country. You're going to write an article next week telling me that Cajuns are infecting people with COVID-19 because of the way that they talk, or that deaf people are now immune because they use sign language and don't get spit on like we do. COVID-19 is real. A whole lot of people have died. A lot of businesses have gone under for good. People have lost their livelihoods. People are really struggling. And we got news outlets who keep pushing these nonsense stories. Because since COVID is the going thing, we got to find some new angle, something new to say about COVID, something interesting, something shocking, something that will outrage, something that will put people in boxes. And we just not playing that game on In the Shed. This story is silly. It's just silly. And it's not science. Our last story in the world of politics, alligator crawls out of Mobile storm drain. A scary encounter for a few people in Mobile on Monday as an unexpected critter crawled out of a storm drain. It was an alligator right in the middle of South Washington Avenue, and it drew a lot of attention. Kanisha Miller and Anthony Patterson were the first to spot the gator, and they couldn't believe it themselves. We saw the gator hanging out the drainage over there, and we didn't think it was real. And so we turned around, and we came back, and he was coming up into the grass, Patterson said. And we started recording, and everybody started coming out like, wow, a gator in the hood. Pause show. Somebody write that script. I'm just saying, get somebody, get Quentin Tarantino on the phone. Get the Coen brothers on the phone. Somebody get up with Denzel. Gator in the hood. I will watch that movie. The pair acted quickly and called 911. Wildlife rescue came and took the gator away. Luckily, they showed up when they did, as kids nearby were getting off a school bus. The bus stop was right there, and the kids was getting off the bus, and they could have been playing in the grass and not seen the gator and easily could have gotten bitten, Patterson said. Imagine with me, them children getting off the school bus and not knowing it's an alligator in the grass. Who expects an alligator at your bus stop? In Alabama, you better. That's where. Miller says they stayed and waited to watch out for the kids because the situation could have gone bad quickly. Good job. Good neighbors right there. It could have been an end of life so swiftly, Miller said. I mean, it really could have. It was unclear where the alligator was taken. Thankfully, no one was hurt. Well, we don't know that nobody was hurt. I mean, where was the alligator taken? Let's get PETA on the case. He was taken somewhere, but his whereabouts are unknown to this day. So I'm looking at the video right now, and it's a small gator, but it looks like it's about 4 feet or so, and it's certainly big enough to do some damage. A thing could take one of them children into that storm drain, and that would be scary. You hear urban legends and rumors all the time about alligators in the sewer. It turns out that right down the street from where I'm at right now recording this show, that is not an urban legend but a reality. This right here, about 45 minutes from where I'm sitting right now, alligator in the storm drain. And that is why my children don't ride the bus. I pick them up from school. I drop them off at school. Because I ain't about to let my kids get off of the bus and have to fight against the alligator. I don't play that. I'm a good parent. Before we leave the world of politics, I just want to do a little exercise together. So if you will be so kind, imagine with me for a second Nancy Pelosi with a bowl cut riding a carousel. Nancy Pelosi with a bowl cut riding a carousel. Just think about it. Has nothing to do with anything else today. But I just want you to imagine it. Okay. Thank you for your participation. And I apologize for your nightmares. All right, let's switch to the world of sports, and let's hit the headlines. Tua helps Dolphins to win after Brissett injury. Rams add Beckham Jr. to already potent offense. Seahawks quarterback Russell Wilson close to 100% after injury. Cam Newton reunited with quarterback-thin Panthers. Kentucky loses to Duke as Coach K farewell tour kicks off. Bulls center Vucevic tests positive for COVID-19. And UConn hires ex-UCLA coach Jim Mora to rebuild program. So on next week's show, we'll check in with the NBA standings and how the season is going so far. We'll talk some college basketball. But hey, this week is all football, my babies. It's all football all the time. And we start now with something we don't talk about a lot on this show. And that's high school football. High school football. High school principal apologizes for lack of sportsmanship after football team wins game 106-0. A Los Angeles high school is apologizing after facing criticism that its football team didn't simply defeat an opponent, but rather trounced the opposing squad by a score of 106-0. Inglewood High School principal Debbie Tate issued the statement on Monday, saying that her school's team did not conduct themselves with sportsmanship or integrity, and the final score was unacceptable. Our administration and coaching staff believe that athletics should be a source of pride for our community. While Friday's game did not reflect our best judgment as administrators, the Morningside High School and Inglewood High School football players and their coaches have worked hard all season and deserve our respect, Tate said. Both schools are in the Inglewood Unified School District, and the school district officials say that they are saddened beyond words in regards to the game's score and will conduct an investigation. We will conduct a full investigation and take whatever steps are necessary to ensure that a similar outcome never happens again under an ISUD athletic program, County Administrator Eric Torres said in a statement. We value the hard work and commitment made by every student-athlete and regret these actions have taken the focus away from the positive strides our programs have made. Inglewood High School's quarterback is UCLA bound and passed for 13 touchdowns in the game. 13 touchdowns. The team scored 56 points in the first quarter and by halftime was up 83-0. The most controversial move came when Inglewood's head coach went for a 2-point conversion when the team was already up 104-0, tying Hilo High School in Hawaii for the highest scoring high school football game in the last 5 years. He used their star quarterback, so it was to be expected, Morningside football player Davon Scruggs told CNN affiliate KABC. We came in the game knowing that we were going to lose. But at the same time, we still fought to the very end and didn't quit, and that's what really matters. However, his coach, Brian Collins, who is a first-time head coach, told the Los Angeles Times it was a classless move, but that he was proud of his players for not quitting. To me, this is crazy. This is crazy. The winning team's principal, Debbie Tate, says that her school's team did not conduct themselves with sportsmanship or integrity, and the final score was unacceptable. She went on to say that the Morningside High School and Inglewood High School football players and their coaches have worked hard all season and deserve our respect. Let me just be the first to say, the players and coaches at Morningside High School do not deserve I respect. You lost the game 106-0. And for one of your players and your coach to say that you fought hard the whole game and never gave up, never quit, and that you're proud, you don't have anything to be proud about. You lost 106-0. And I know that some people will hear this and they'll be like, hey, you're being far too hard. These are high school children that we're talking about. And I get that. But to me, this is also a part of the problem with our society. And at the expense of sounding like a get off my lawn person and going on a tirade about participation trophies, at a certain level, you need to be aware that your performance was just not very good. And if anything about the outcome was unacceptable, it was the fact that you gave up 106 points. Because I believe I could find me some people at the grocery store and throw them out on the field with a little bit of coaching, and we could give up less than 106 points in a football game. And yeah, I'll admit that probably going for 2 up 104-0, that might make some people angry. That might come across as a little bit classless, a little bit of overkill. But if I'm that coach and if I'm that administrator, why not be proud of your football team for winning the game 106-0? You were up 83-0 at halftime. It's the other team's job to stop you. It's not your job to stop yourself. Your coaches coach hard. Your players work hard at practice to become better and perform well on the field. Why would you put a cap on how well they can perform? Why would you say you have performed so well that we are disappointed in your performance? That don't make very much sense to me. Are you complaining when they study real hard and score 100 on their test? Are you complaining if they get a 1600 on the SATs? So why complain now when they perform to the best of their abilities on the football field? What do you want the coach to do? Put in the middle school squad after halftime? Instead of being lambasted by the principal, I feel like this team should get a plaque. I feel like they should get memorialized by the school. I think maybe they should get free pizza in the cafeteria. It sounds like they have a good football team at Inglewood. And for the district to say that they're going to launch an investigation to make sure something like this never happens again, that is so laughable. Launch an investigation into Morningside High School's defense. Launch an investigation to what they're doing when they're supposed to be practicing. Launch an investigation into whether or not their coaches actually know very much about football. Because I've been on sporting teams my whole life that got blown out. They got beat bad. I've had my head kicked in. I've had my brake speed off me. I ain't never lost a game 106-0. Not on the basketball court, not on the football field, not even on Madden. You have to try to lose 106-0. And I'm not trying to make light of some high school kids that didn't perform well or that were overmatched athletically. But I also don't think that we should be berating the winning team for performing well. You can call me a hater. I think 106-0 is awesome. I think it's fantastic. I think it's something that players on either team will never forget. The time that they won 106-0. The time that they lost 106-0. And if I was the principal at that school, I would say how proud I am of my team. I would privately tell the coach, maybe just kick the extra point next time. But I would give them pizza in the cafeteria, and I would root them on because obviously they're going to the playoffs. From high school football, we go to the world of college football, and let's take you around the SEC. This week, New Mexico State travels to number 2 Alabama, and I hope they get on the scoreboard this weekend. Mississippi State visits number 17 Auburn, both teams coming off of disappointing losses last week. That will be a good matchup there. Florida hosts Samford, and surely Dan Mullen and his team get a win, a much-needed win, surely. Number 1 Georgia visits Rocky Top. Surprising South Carolina visits lowly Missouri. Number 11 Texas A&M goes on the road to take on Lane Kiffin and number 15 Ole Miss. A high-powered offense and a high-powered defense hook up there. Kentucky looks to end their 3-game skid in Nashville against Vanderbilt. And number 25, Arkansas goes to Death Valley to take on LSU. Go Tigers! Three stories worth touching on in the world of college football. The first is developments this week in the coaching carousel. The first is that UConn, University of Connecticut, has hired former UCLA and Atlanta Falcons coach Jim Mora Jr. to rebuild their program. And I got to say, I think that this was a really quality hire for UConn. UConn is a middling program. They're absolutely horrible this year. They're not competitive in Division I football. I honestly was surprised that Jim Mora Jr. had any interest in going to UConn. I thought he might hold out for a better program. Maybe he's just not getting the type of interest that you would expect. But here he takes on a job at UConn where if he can bring in a decent recruiting class and win a few games next year, he can rebuild that thing fast there with the level that they play at. UConn, of course, chasing away Randy Edsall before the season was even over. And I just don't think that they could have done much better than Jim Mora Jr. He's a recognizable name. He has a pedigree. He's a good offensive coach. I think he'll put something together at UConn and in a year or two have them back to being a respectable program. And he's taking on a complete rebuild there. So I thought that was a really good hire. It's going to be interesting to see what happens there. I don't think they could have done any better. The other interesting development in the world of the coaching carousel is Nebraska and athletic director Trev Albert's decision to retain head coach Scott Frost. Nebraska is 3-7 on the year. They've dropped 4 games in a row, most of which they've at least been competitive in. And Scott Frost's record since coming from UCF to Nebraska is 15-27 overall. Look, the truth is Nebraska has just not been competitive in the Big Ten. Prior to Scott Frost, with Mike Riley, with Scott Frost, they just have not been a competitive team in the Big Ten. That was a disastrous move for Nebraska. If Nebraska fans are being honest, looking back, they would have wished that they just would have stayed where they were, that they would have stayed put in the Big 12, where they had a better chance to be a good football program. And certainly Scott Frost has been a disappointment. Scott Frost was one of the best players in Nebraska football history, who came to Lincoln with a whole lot of fanfare. Coming off some really good seasons at UCF, people expected the offense to be high-powered, expected the recruiting to be phenomenal, expected him to develop quarterbacks and win football games, and it just has not happened for Scott Frost at Nebraska. But even so, I feel like this was actually the correct decision. And that might seem like a crazy thing to say. Like, why is retaining a losing football coach who's 3-7 this year, how can that possibly be the right decision? And the reason why is because the grass ain't always greener on the other side. If you fire Scott Frost, who are you going to get to come to Nebraska that's going to do a better job? First of all, you won't find anybody that cares more about Nebraska and Nebraska football than Scott Frost. You got to think that he's 110% invested into rebuilding this program and getting things right there because that's the place that he went to school. That's his alma mater. His jersey's in the rafters, so to speak. He wants to get things right there. You're not going to find anybody that cares more. But who's going to come to Nebraska? Nebraska that has not been anywhere other than the cellar of the Big Ten. Nebraska that's located in the middle of nowhere in middle America. Nebraska that used to be a superpower, but if we're being honest, has very little going for it today. The grass isn't always greener on the other side, but the grass is greener where it's watered. And sometimes in college football, when these universities switch out coaches every 3 years, every 2 years, every 4 years, when there's not instant gratification and quick success, they miss out on an opportunity. They miss out on an opportunity for coaches to build something, for coaches to get it right, for coaches to figure out how to make things work, how to adjust their coaching staff, how to adjust their recruiting, how to build a recruiting base, what type of offensive playbook and defensive playbook they need to be successful where they are. And if you're looking for an example of what I'm talking about, look no further than Dabo Swinney. Dabo Swinney didn't step into Clemson as a big-time head football coach. He didn't step into the head coaching office and just make a huge difference from day one, and they were off and firing on all cylinders. It was a process. He was coming in as a lowly assistant coach that wasn't up for any head coaching jobs anywhere else in the country. But he knew Clemson. and he had been on the staff, and he had been given a chance, and he was named the interim head football coach. And even though West Virginia hung like 70 points on Clemson in the bowl game and embarrassed them, Dabo Swinney was supported and stood behind by the athletic director and the athletic department at Clemson. He was allowed to bring his guys in. He was allowed to pay his assistants well. He was allowed to build a culture and set expectations and develop character and be around players. And you might not like Dabo, and that's okay. But you have to respect what he's built at Clemson. Even this year when they're 6-3 experiencing a down year, they've been in the playoffs every year. They've been a top 5 team every year. And there's no doubt that they're a top 5 program in college football today. And it very easily could have not happened if they had acted quickly, if they had pulled the trigger, if they had responded to the disappointment of his tenure early and moved on. And I'm not saying that Scott Frost is Dabo Swinney. I don't know that Scott Frost will get things put together at Nebraska. And likely he will only get next year to show some really good progress, like making it to a bowl game. But I think Nebraska is making the right decision and at least giving him the opportunity to try. He's in year 4. He's going on year 5. That's a long time. You don't get that much time at many places in America. But if Nebraska actually wants to turn things around, they don't have much other choice than to stick with a guy that cares. Stick with a guy that wants to win there. Stick with a guy that's not looking to go other places. And we've seen Scott Frost win before. We've seen him win at a high level at UCF. A level that other coaches have not won at and have not been able to replicate at Central Florida. And he's got at least one more shot. It'll be interesting to see what happens and what he does there. One of the games that I was looking forward to watching that I talked about on the show last week was Auburn on the road against Texas A&M, a matchup of 2 teams that were ranked inside the top 15. And unfortunately, it was not much of a game. Texas A&M dominated on the field. They won the game 20-3. And this week I have dealt with a lot of Auburn fans who are severely disappointed in that result. Because if Auburn had won that game, if they had found a way to go into College Station and beat Texas A&M, a good Texas A&M team, then they would have continued to control their destiny. And all that would have been left is a matchup with Mississippi State and South Carolina. And then you would have the most exciting game of the season in college football. You would have the Iron Bowl in Jordan-Hare, with both teams ranked inside the top 10, with the winner going to the SEC championship game to face Georgia. So, with all that on the line, Auburn barely shows up. Auburn gets dominated. Auburn loses 20-3. And they drop to 6-3 on the year. And a lot of Auburn fans have thrown their hands up in the air and they've said, here we go again. We're so used to this. Games that we're supposed to be competitive, games that are big games, and our team doesn't show up and we get blown out. It's the same old, same old. Bo Nix plays inconsistent on the road. We're unable to run the football. What's the deal? I thought we were a better team. And I got to tell you that Auburn is a better football team. Because after their losses earlier in the year, they actually have improved substantially. And coming into this game, this was the most consistent that Bo Nix has played at quarterback in his Auburn tenure. He's had multiple games in a row, some on the road, some at home, where he's actually played very well, where he's played comfortably in the pocket, where he hasn't rushed things, where he's been able to use his legs to create. And I know that it's disappointing to see this result, to see a 20-3 loss on the road against a team that you're supposed to be evenly matched against, especially when the defense played well enough for you to win. But based on what I've seen so far, I believe in Brian Harsin and his coaching staff that he's put together. And I expect Auburn to improve a lot this week from their performance last week. And I expect them to come out fired up against Mississippi State. And if Auburn beats Mississippi State and South Carolina, if they lose to Alabama and they end the year 8-4, most people who are being honest and fair would have to count that as a successful first year for Brian Harsin. A lot of people thought Auburn would win 6 games, 7 games. And really, we've been competitive in all but 2. And I know it's frustrating to see some of the same issues this season in this game show up that we've seen in years prior. But you have to understand that until Auburn is able to get the offensive and defensive line straight, we're going to have issues. That's why we're able to have one of the better backfields in the country, stocked full of talent, but we're unable to run the football. It's an offensive line issue. That's why we're unable to call blitzes consistently and get pressure on the quarterback, and they have all day to throw. It's a depth issue at defensive line. We have some really good players up front, but it's a depth issue. And ultimately, it comes down to strength and conditioning and recruiting. Because as much as I like Wes Memaw, he did a good job at Auburn overall. He's a good football coach and a good man. He went 2 years in a row on the recruiting trail without even signing an offensive lineman. And to say that out loud is mind-boggling. How do you go 2 recruiting cycles in a row without even signing a single offensive lineman and expect to be competitive in the SEC? They weren't even trying to recruit offensive linemen at the level that we needed to. If you want to be successful in a conference like the SEC, it all starts up front. It starts with being able to run the football and being able to stop the run, being able to rush the passer and get pressure on the quarterback. And Auburn wasn't even signing offensive linemen. And not only that, on the defensive side of the football, we have lost needed depth at D-line as well. We signed plenty of really talented cornerbacks and safeties. We have a really good stock of linebackers. We've got talent at running back on the offensive side of football, but we didn't sign enough quality players and athletes to have the depth necessary on the defensive line the last 2 or 3 years. And it comes down to that. It comes down to recruiting on the offensive line and the defensive line, and it comes down to the strength and conditioning. Because Wes Memaw did not hire strength and conditioning coaches who are innovative and creative and who pushed the boundaries and who built the type of explosive athletes needed to compete for the SEC West Championship. Instead, he hired coaches that he was comfortable with, strength and conditioning coaches who he knew, who were familiar to him, that were his friends. And while you can say a lot about the loyalty, it does not help you on the football field. Does Bo Nix need to play better than he did Saturday? Absolutely. Could the play calling be better? Absolutely. Was it frustrating that we have one of the best kickers in the country and we miss a 33-yard chip shot field goal? Yes. But if you boil it down to the least common denominator, the reason why Auburn is having a hard time in some of these big games, the reason why we can't run the football, the reason why our quarterback is scared in the pocket, the reason why we can't get pressure on the opposing quarterback, the reason why our cornerbacks and safeties haven't had the season that you've expected them to have and haven't come away with as many interceptions as you think they would, it all boils down to the O-line and the D-line. Our offensive line is just not very good. Our defensive line is good, but it doesn't have any depth. There's no quality depth behind our starters. It comes down to recruiting and strength and conditioning. So the question for Brian Harsin will be, how quickly can you correct those two things? Is the strength and conditioning coach that you have one who can implement a program that helps Auburn's players make big enough strides to be competitive again? And can you put together recruiting classes in your first season or two that provide the top-level type of depth needed to compete with teams like Georgia and Alabama and Texas A&M and LSU and Florida? It remains to be seen. Auburn has the 34th ranked recruiting class nationally as of right now, which puts them at 13th in the SEC overall. The only team with a worse recruiting class than Auburn is Vanderbilt. That's where we at right now. So, overall, I think Brian Harsin has done a very good job in his first season at Auburn. And I think if he finishes 8-4, you have to like what you see. I think that he's gotten some of the better football out of Bo Nix that he's played, and we've been competitive in most of our games this year. But if you want to be there long term, you have to be more competitive against your rivals in Georgia and Alabama than we've been in recent years. And it all starts with strength and conditioning and with recruiting. And he's got to pick up his recruiting quickly. Auburn is usually a top 8 to 12 team nationally and 4th or 5th, 6th in the SEC overall in recruiting. So to be 34th overall and 13th in the SEC is not familiar territory. And it doesn't bode well for the future. And we've got to get it corrected fast. The other team I want to touch on quickly is the Kentucky Wildcats, who lost to Tennessee, which was their third loss in a row after a 6-0 start, which included wins over Florida and LSU. Kentucky has Vanderbilt up on the schedule this week, followed by New Mexico State and Louisville. And it's been a very disappointing stretch for the Kentucky Wildcats. Coming into that game against Georgia, looking like they had a chance to go 10-2 or 11-1 on the year to solidify themselves as the second best team in the SEC, in the SEC East, I should say, and then now to lose 3 games in a row, including to your rival Tennessee. And I know Kentucky fans are disappointed, but I just want to say, if Kentucky can find a way to beat Vanderbilt, New Mexico State, and Louisville, they're going to finish the year 9-3. And any other season at Kentucky, 9-3 will get you a statue built. This year is disappointing. And that just speaks to the job that head coach Mark Stoops has done at Kentucky, the program that he's built there. He's recruiting better there right now than anyone ever has. He's got a talent level right there on offense and defense that is far above and beyond where they were early in his tenure. I predicted at the beginning of the season that Kentucky would finish second in the SEC East. That's still on the table for the Wildcats. I know they lost 3 in a row. That's super disappointing, especially after the start they had. But, hey, overall, you have to like where their program is. You have to like the direction that it's heading. If they can hold on to Mark Stoops and their coaching staff, I really actually like their offensive coordinator who's in his first year and the changes he's made to update their offense even. You have a little bit of continuity on the offensive side of the football and at quarterback, and you can see some big things from Kentucky in the next year or two. It's going to be interesting to see because Kentucky is trying, they're fighting tooth and nail to become that second-best team or on the same level as the second-best team in the East perennially, to battle with Florida. Florida, who now is looking like they're on the downward spiral of their own. To battle with Tennessee, who now looks like they're on their way back. And to be able to put out a football team that's at least competitive year to year with Georgia. They can at least compete. And I didn't think that their game with Georgia was at all embarrassing. I thought that they kept it closer than most teams for most of the game. They just ran into a juggernaut. So Kentucky fans, I know you're disappointed at 6-3. But we're going to beat Vanderbilt this weekend. We're going to beat New Mexico State. And then we've got a toss-up at Louisville. If we can win all 3 of those games and finish the season 9-3, what a great season. What a great opportunity to get 10 wins when we play in a bowl game and to build on it and to keep moving forward. 3 games I'm looking forward to this weekend. Number 8, Oklahoma at number 13, Baylor. Baylor has 2 losses. They're still ranked 13th in the country in the college football playoff poll. And I'm hoping that they hold serve against Oklahoma. I'm hoping that they beat Oklahoma. I'm so tired of seeing Oklahoma with a terrible defense in the playoffs. If somebody's going to get curb stomped in the playoffs, can we at least put a new team in? Can we give Cincinnati a chance? Can we give UTSA a chance? That's not going to happen, but they should be at least close. I'm tired of Oklahoma going undefeated in their conference, making it to the playoffs and getting beat by 35 points because they can't stop nobody. And I hope Baylor takes care of that for us. Handle our light work, Baylor Bears. Do the Lord's work for us. I'm also looking forward to watching Purdue at number 4, Ohio State. Purdue has gone big game hunting already. They've already knocked off the 2nd-ranked Iowa Hawkeyes and the 3rd-ranked Michigan State Spartans. And now they take on the number 4-ranked Buckeyes. So I think this game will tell us a lot because Purdue has proven that they have an offense that can score a lot of points. They've proven that they can step up to the plate for big games. And we haven't really seen Ohio State play a big game since they lost to Oregon. And they look like a much better team since then. They look like they've really found their stride. C.J. Stroud is playing well at quarterback. That's why we have Ohio State at 8-1, ranked 3rd in the country. But this is a chance for them to show that that's fair, and that they deserve a spot in the playoffs, and that they're an improved team, that their defense has gotten better. I think they're like 20-point favorites according to Vegas. I don't think that they will win by that much, but I do expect them to pull it out. And the other game we're looking forward to is number 11 Texas A&M at number 15 Ole Miss. Texas A&M has a very, very good defense and a lot of talent. Ole Miss throws the ball around, moves at a quick pace, and scores a lot of points. And on the one hand, Lane Kiffin really has something going at Ole Miss because he has them ranked in the top 25. They've had a successful season. They seem to be building something. They score a lot of points. But on the other hand, what big games has he really won? Like, they've been more competitive against Alabama, especially last year, than expected. Like, they've done some good things, but what big games has Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss really won? So I see this as an opportunity for them to kind of have a signature win for the Lane Kiffin era. They're at home. They're playing a near top 10 team in Texas A&M that has already beaten Auburn and Alabama. This is your chance, Ole Miss. You're going to have a ton of recruits on hand. You're playing against a good defense. This is a chance for you to show that you are a contender and a team to be reckoned with in the SEC West. And I hope they do. I hope they do win. I think that Lane Kiffin is a talented football coach, and he's an entertaining guy. He doesn't do a lot of that coach speak nonsense. And quite frankly, I just do not like Jimbo Fisher. Don't like very much about that man. So I will be an Ole Miss rebel, and I will root for Ole Miss. Let's go, Lane Kiffin. Put it on them boys. One thing we always do in the world of college football is our In the Shed with Wes Solid 7. That's where we pick 7 college football games on the weekend and go against the spread. Last week, we had a rough weekend. Our Solid 7 was not solid at all. I wouldn't even say that it was a liquid 7. It was probably more gaseous. We went 0-6 on the weekend, my babies. 0-6, and we had one push for the second week in a row. It was very disappointing. I believed in those picks, and not one of them worked out. And it dropped our average from 50% correct on the year down to 46%. And I'm not happy with that. So I took some extra time, and I put my heart into my picks this week. For this week's Solid 7. And we're already 1-0 on the weekend because one of the games that we picked happened Tuesday night. So I put these picks up on our Twitter at InTheShed4. You can find them there, but I'll share them with you quickly here. This weekend, we picked Akron plus 27 at Western Michigan, and we got that one correct. We picked Boise State minus 14 versus Wyoming. That game happens later tonight. We picked Clemson to cover as 40-point favorites versus UConn. Memphis as 6-point favorites versus Eastern Carolina. We took Purdue plus 20 at Ohio State. Louisiana Monroe minus 3 at Arkansas State. And Utah State plus 4.5 at San Jose State. So those are our In the Shed with Wes Solid 7 picks for Week 11 in the world of college football. Akron plus 27, Boise State minus 14, Clemson minus 40, Memphis minus 6, Purdue plus 20, UL Monroe minus 3, Utah State plus 4.5 points. So I'm not saying, I'm just saying you should have plenty of time after hearing this to do whatever it is you need to do, my babies. You just go ahead and do you. Do with this information what you will, shawty. The college football playoff rankings, top 10 looks like this week. Number 1 is still Georgia. Number 2 is still Alabama, even after their disappointing performance. Number 3 is Oregon, and Ohio State slides in at number 4. Followed by Cincinnati at 5, Michigan at 6, Michigan State at 7, Oklahoma at 8, Notre Dame at 9, and Oklahoma State at 10. Those rankings are starting to look a little bit better, and they're moving closer to ours. Here are our In the Shed with the West top 25 rankings this week. We have Georgia number 1 overall, Cincinnati number 2, Ohio State number 3, Alabama number 4, and Oklahoma number 5. Number 6 is Oregon. Number 7, Notre Dame. Number 8, Michigan. Number 9, UTSA. And number 10, Texas A&M. At 11, we have Michigan State. 12, Oklahoma State. 13, Wake Forest. 14, Ole Miss. 15, Coastal Carolina. 16, Iowa. 17, BYU. 18, Louisiana. 19, Houston. 20, Baylor. 21, NC State. 22nd, Auburn. 23rd, Appalachian State, 24th, Arkansas, and rounding out our top 25 is San Diego State at 8-1. So those are our In the Shed with Wes top 25 college football rankings this week. We put those up on Twitter as well. Get at us and let us know what you think. Where do we go right? What do we have wrong? Who do we have ranked too highly? And who do we have that is not ranked high enough? You can get at us on Twitter, or you can email the show at intheshedwithwes@gmail.com. Very quickly, before we move on from the world of sports, we're going to throw a little bit of NFL news in there as well. A few things to watch this week. One is that two players have found new teams. That's Cam Newton, who has re-signed with the Carolina Panthers, and OBJ, who has signed with the Los Angeles Rams. And also two quarterbacks that may be making their returns, Aaron Rodgers from COVID and public scorn, and Russell Wilson from injury. The thing on there that is most exciting to me, of course, as an Auburn football fan, and as someone who has watched Panthers football since they were an expansion team and started Chris Winkie at quarterback. That was his real name. You can look it up. He played at FSU. I'm excited to see Cam Newton back on the field, first of all, because Cam Newton is still an NFL quarterback. And you can argue with me all you want to about whether he's a starter in the league, and we will see. But he's certainly good enough to be on the roster. And there's definitely not 29 or 30 NFL quarterbacks who are starting on Sunday who are better than Cam Newton. I thought when the Panthers moved on from Cam Newton a couple years ago that they did not show him the respect he deserved as the franchise's greatest player of all time. But alas, they have brought him back. And some people in media, even this morning, are saying that this is nothing more than an attempt to sell tickets. But I don't think that's true. I think this is an attempt to win some football games. Because Carolina is 4-5, and with an extra team added to the playoffs, they are not out of the mix. And they have better receivers than they've had in years past. They just got Christian McCaffrey back from injury. Their defense at times this year has looked really, really good. Their pass rush has looked exceptional. I think they want to see what they can do to make a run down the stretch. And I don't blame them for that. They don't have a quarterback on their roster, even with the healthy Sam Darnold, that's better than Cam Newton. But especially with Sam Darnold out, why not bring Cam Newton in on a one-year deal and see what he can offer the team? See what he can do. Unfortunately for the Panthers, this week they go up against the best team in the NFL so far in the Arizona Cardinals. That's unfortunate. But after that, the week after, they take on the Washington football team and former head coach Ron Rivera. And that will be an interesting game to watch. OBJ to the Rams makes a lot of sense. I don't think that he will make that team exceptionally more explosive than they are. They already have weapons galore, but it can't hurt. And OBJ, who was not a fit in a city like Cleveland, will be a fit in a city like Los Angeles. So I think that was a good signing for both OBJ and the Rams there. And I hope that Aaron Rodgers and Russell Wilson both return to the football field on Sunday, because that will be a fun matchup to watch. Aaron Rodgers, who is going to put together a second half of the season that is MVP worthy, and Russell Wilson, who is more valuable to the success of his football team than probably anybody else in the NFL. 3 games that I'm looking forward to watching this weekend in the NFL are the Panthers at the Cardinals, the Seahawks at the Packers for those reasons I've already expressed, and the Chiefs at the Raiders. Can Patrick Mahomes and company build off of finally finding a way to win a football game? Can they beat a good Raiders team? Will the Raiders rebound, and will they express themselves as a formidable opponent and a dominant football team even after all of the off-field tragedy and distraction and drama that they've experienced, first with John Gruden and then with Henry Ruggs? So that's football for you today, high school, college, and NFL. We had a whole lot of football. We covered it all. That is the world of sports for you this week. Now let's switch to this, the world of the paranormal. Our first story in the world of the paranormal, a giant boom was heard throughout New Hampshire on Sunday. No one knows for sure what it was. What was it, my tools? What was it, my babies? It was a fairly typical October morning in New Hampshire on Sunday, until a strange loud boom rattled much of the state, as well as parts of Massachusetts and Maine. My goodness, I know those are smaller states, but man, this boom was felt throughout the state of New Hampshire and also rattled parts of Massachusetts and Maine. What's happening? Residents reported feeling like their homes were shaking after the boom, leaving some people to suspect a large earthquake had just occurred. However, data from the National Earthquake Information Center, part of the United States Geological Survey, showed that no earthquake had occurred anywhere in the Northeast in the past week. The closest earthquake to New Hampshire was a 2.0 magnitude one on Tuesday in northeast Tennessee, and the most recent one in the state was a 1.7 magnitude earthquake on August 22nd. With no evidence of an earthquake, residents have been left wondering what caused the mysterious sound. Dan Bryan, who lives in New Boston, roughly 15 miles southwest of the capital of Concord. How many of y'all knew that Concord was the capital of New Hampshire? Concord, New Hampshire. Also, they have a town called New Boston. They was living in Massachusetts and was like, this not it. We gonna go over here, and we gonna make a New Boston. I wonder if they have the new Red Sox, or if they have the new Celtics. Probably not. Anyway, back to Dan Bryan of Concord. Dan Bryan told the New York Times the boom rattled his home and he thought something had exploded. It had like an audible boom to it. It was very strange. That's why everyone thought it was like an explosion, he said. In the same town, Fire Department Chief Dan McDonald said the department received many calls about the noise. Many Twitter users also tweeted about the event, trying to suggest what may have caused it. So far, no person or agency has confessed to being behind the incident. WMUR reported multiple police departments in New Hampshire responded to calls but didn't identify a source. The outlet also said that the FAA Regional Operations Center had no military plane activity over the state that morning. So far, over 1,000 people have shared their experiences on the website Volcano Discovery, where people can report any seismic activity. Some of the responses said the boom was almost like a huge bomb going off, or a sonic boom. Greg Cornwell, a meteorologist with the National Weather Service, told the Keene Sentinel Monday there is reason to believe the sound came from a meteor entering Earth's atmosphere, despite there being no reported instances of that happening. Meteors will typically disintegrate as they get closer to the ground, according to NASA. So, they had a big boom in New Hampshire, and it was freaking people out, and they don't know why. And I saw one person on Twitter that was like, I don't know what just happened. I don't know what that noise was, but it sure scared my chickens. And I was like, hey, this fella and I could be friends. You could transplant this man from New Hampshire to Alabama, and he would fit right in. I had chickens once. I raised chickens. 12 of them. 4 of them made it to adulthood, and then a raccoon tore them to shreds. It was so sad. It was so sad. And that's why I'm against the trash pandas, even to this day. A big boom in New Hampshire. And we got to learn some New Hampshire geography. Concord is the capital. New Boston is a town. Maybe that big boom was just Chris Christie, a couple states over, going off the high dive. Oh, man. Our next story in the world of the paranormal, hunter claims he filmed Bigfoot with hidden cameras. There's a hunter in Michigan who went by the name of Craig Sulk. He died in April of 2021 of cancer. However, he shared a video with the television show Finding Bigfoot before he passed away. The video was so fascinating that he knew he had to pass it along. The 59-year-old led a simple life on his 80 acres of land in Menominee, Michigan, with his beloved wife Barb, according to the New York Post. The couple lived in a one-room cabin and worked part-time jobs at a Subway restaurant at a local gas station. Oh, and they really loved hunting. They loved it so much they had set up several cameras in the forest to increase their odds. Back in 2012, one of his cameras captured a mysterious figure that did not appear to be an animal or a human or one of their wonky neighbors in the nude. That's a strange thing to just put in the middle of this article, like it didn't appear to be an animal or a human or one of their naked neighbors. Is this a problem in Menominee, Michigan? The neighbors just be out there in the woods on your acreage, just not wearing clothes? Like, I don't understand why we had to mention that. That was bizarre. That might be more bizarre than the footage. This led to Craig sending the footage to the reality show on Animal Planet. You can take a look at the clip below, which I have done. Craig had captured 3 shots of Bigfoot. The first was blank, the second showed the creepy figure, and the third was blank. We were getting calls from people who had seen a Bigfoot but never told anybody because people would think they're crazy, Barb said, according to the New York Post. He didn't put it out there until after Animal Planet came out because he didn't want people to think he was crazy. After the airing of the show, lots of people reached out to Barb about their sightings. I had a lady come up to me one time, and she was just shaking, that she had to come out and talk to us because she said she can't get it out of her head, that she saw a Bigfoot looking in their camper window. It was just so exciting. It just feels like it's a dirty, rotten shame that Craig's dream had to end like this, said Barb. Interesting story. My condolences to you, Barb, and all of those that loved Craig for his passing, relatively recent. But this video that he captured on his trail cam is actually somewhat compelling. Usually when I'm looking at these videos or these pictures, or these images, or these stories with you, I keep it 100 with you, my tools. I keep it a buck with you. And most of the time, I'm like, hey, I see nothing in these pictures. I don't think there's anything there. Like the guy, the Man of Light or whatever we talked about a couple weeks ago on the show. His YouTube channel where he's searching for Bigfoot. And he's like, here's a picture. And it's just some leaves. And I see nothing. And I looked at like 5 of those videos. I watched all of them. I ain't see nothing. But in these pictures Mr. Craig has right here, they're interesting. Because there appears to be a figure of some size and some height standing in between the trees. And I guess it could be a shadow or it could be something else. I don't know if they have bears in that area. There could be normal and rational explanations. Or it could be a Bigfoot. I'm just saying. And I've said before that I am a hopeful believer when it comes to the issue of Bigfoot. I do not have any necessarily seen any evidence that has convinced me 100% that Bigfoot is a real thing. But I also know that we discover animals that exist that we didn't know about all the time. And we also discover animals that used to exist that we did not know of, that we were unaware of all the time. So I thought this was an interesting thing. If you want to find it, you can Google search it and find those images for yourself. Apparently, they made it on an episode of Finding Bigfoot, which I've seen that show. I have not seen this episode. And it's some somewhat compelling video. So yeah, maybe there's a Bigfoot in Michigan. From Michigan, we go to Florida for our next story in the world of the paranormal, the Devil's Chair. Ooh, we getting spooky, my babies. It's no longer Halloween, but we still creepy in the shed. Talking the Devil's Chair. Which, of course, is located in Florida, which makes, total sense that it would be in the state of Florida. And the devil would feel right at home for many reasons, including the heat there. In Casadaga, Florida, there's a historic site at a cemetery with a stone and brick chair known as the Devil's Chair. The Devil's Chair can be found at Lake Helen Casadaga Cemetery. According to urban legend, if you sit in the immense brick chair at midnight, the devil will pay you a visit. Furthermore, if you place an unopened can of beer on the Devil's Chair at midnight, you will be greeted with an empty can the next morning. However, the most likely explanation for the Devil's Chair is that it once served as a so-called mourning chair for elderly gentlemen visiting their wives' graves. But the legend is much more interesting, don't you think? So, a very short story here, but one that I thought was worth including because I've been seeing so much about this on social media lately. In Florida, there is this chair. It is made of brick. It is at a cemetery, and it is referred to as the Devil's Chair. And legend has it that if you sit there at midnight, the devil will pay you a visit. And I don't know who these people are who want to be paid a visit by the devil. But people are trying this, and they're going to this chair, and they're sitting there at midnight. And what are they hoping for? What is the best case scenario if you get visited by the devil? Because in all the stories that I have heard and read and seen in movies and television and media and lore, the only good thing to ever come from being visited by the devil is that maybe you become a very good violin player. So, if you want to play the fiddle, maybe this is the spot to be. But I'm not putting my soul at risk for a little bit of bluegrass celebrity Even living in the state of Alabama, I'm just not willing to do it. I'm not messing with the devil's chair. And I thought it was pretty funny that if you put a full beer can there in the morning, the can will be empty, because to me, and I'm just saying, I'm just saying, to me, it's probably likely that somebody coming and drinking the beer. I don't know if it's a homeless man that lives nearby, if there's a house across the street maybe, if there's a home across the street from the cemetery, and every few weeks they see somebody place a beer out there, and they like, well, I got me a free beer. I don't know. Maybe that's why the urban legend was started, but it's certainly an interesting looking thing to have this chair made out of bricks right in the middle of the cemetery. It sounds like a creepy place to visit, but as far as trying to meet with the devil, you can count your boy out. I'm outie 3,000 on that, my babies. I want nothing to do with that. I'm rolling with the Lord. They see me, Lord, and the devil. No, I don't want that. Shout out to Theo Vaughn. If you know, you know. If you don't know, maybe you will know. The devil's chair. Very interesting stuff. And for our last story in the world of the paranormal, we go to our nation's history. Abraham Lincoln never existed. Abraham Lincoln never existed? That's the claim by a group of online conspiracy theorists and self-proclaimed historical sleuths. In school, we're taught that Abraham Lincoln was a great man who never told a lie. I thought that was George Washington. Abraham Lincoln was Honest Abe, but I think it was George Washington that never told a lie, but I digress. Was the 16th president, held the nation together during the Civil War, freed the slaves with the Emancipation Proclamation, and then was assassinated by John Wilkes Booth. But why do we believe this? Because it's written in a book and we're told it's true? Maybe we believe it because it happened, but I'm going to try to keep an open mind here. Here we go. When examining the alleged historical record, I love they say alleged historical record, more closely, clear holes in the story start to take shape. Okay, let's see what these holes are. Think about it. I'm going to. In truth, we actually know very little about Abraham Lincoln's childhood and early life before he became a public figure. The details we do have, while sparse, are all generic surface-level details that could easily be true about anyone else living at the time. Consider for a moment the absurdity of someone like Lincoln, a small-town lawyer with no money who no one knew, who looked funny and gave 3-hour speeches, winning a national election for the highest office in the land. And what about the inconsistencies regarding Lincoln's alleged assassination? Or the discrepancies in appearance between pictures that all allegedly depict Lincoln? Throughout the years, Lincoln has been assigned a host of potential medical diagnoses to explain the clear changes in weight and facial structure from picture to picture. What about the multitude of historical reports that once in the White House, reporters and even cabinet members rarely saw the president, sometimes for months at a time? And what of his family? Only one of 4 of Lincoln's children survived to adulthood, a son who never seemed to want to publicly discuss his father or his accomplishments. His alleged wife, Mary Todd Lincoln? Yeah, she was forcibly committed to an insane asylum after the death of her husband. But why? Why make up a president? For who? For what purpose and to what end? To save a nation on the brink. At the time of Lincoln's election, the United States was a fractured and fragmented nation already heading toward a split. The elites and power brokers pulling strings behind the scenes needed this split to happen sooner rather than later, and wanted to ensure the North won so the industrialized cities in which they held investments continued to thrive, and not the slave-fueled agricultural economy of the South. So what did they do? They found a patsy, a stand-in. They created a backstory around him. They poured money into spreading propaganda about his greatness. They wrote his speeches. They bought influence across the nation. And they got their creation, Abraham Lincoln, elected president. Once in office, these elites hired lookalikes to make public appearances and pose for pictures, while their anonymous stand-in lived with his family in the White House. With their patsy president in the Oval Office, these powerful people were able to steer the nation through presidential proclamations, legislation, and decision-making. After successfully starting and winning the Civil War, thus protecting their interests and investments, these controllers hired someone, likely John Wilkes Booth, to assassinate their presidential actor before the ruse was up. They then had his wife legally committed and bought out his son with promises of money and a life of leisure. Abraham Lincoln never really existed, but the idea of Abraham Lincoln did, and it saved our nation while also making a handful of people a whole lot of money. Don't believe us? That's okay. Most don't. But the evidence is there, and we are putting it together daily. Currently, there are an estimated 12,000 historical sleuths who adhere to historically accurate beliefs about the 16th President of the United States, but that number is growing rapidly. Maybe you'll be counted among our ranks soon. After all, you can't always believe what you read. I like how their argument is, hey, you can't always believe what you read. So instead, believe what we are writing. Believe what we are writing on this internet blog and not what the history books say. Look, we don't know a whole lot about Abraham Lincoln's childhood, just stuff that we know about anybody that lived back then. He ain't have electricity. He lived in the cabin. He had some parents, yada, yada, yada. It proves nothing. And then they're like, most of his children died. Is it because they didn't have health care back then or proper medical treatment? No, it's a conspiracy. And the one that did live to adulthood didn't want to talk about his father publicly. Hey, I'm just spitballing. Maybe that's because his daddy died in a very, very tragic and public manner, and it brought him a lot of hardship and pain to talk about it. Maybe Mary Todd Lincoln had to go get some help at a mental health facility, not because there was a giant conspiracy, but because she already had mental health problems when her husband was alive that were then made much, much worse by the trauma of losing him to an assassin's bullet. Or maybe Abraham Lincoln wasn't even real. If you're hearing this and you're like, Wes, what are you doing? This is a news show, and you're sharing a baseless conspiracy theory about our 16th president never existing. Why would you do that? Because it's hilarious. Because it's funny that there are allegedly thousands of people that believe this to be true. Because it highlights that there are people in our society that don't know the difference between fact and fiction, and that who will raise conspiracy theories out of absolutely nothing. Just for the record, I put absolutely no stock into this. I do not think that this is the truth. It would make for an interesting book or for an interesting movie. Get them people on the phone I talked about earlier. Holler at Denzel Washington or the Coen brothers or Quentin Tarantino. Or hey, even call up my boy, M. Night Shyamalan. Get him on the phone. Let this be a twist in his movie about Abraham Lincoln not actually existing. These folks say that Abraham Lincoln was not a person but an idea. He was made up to save the nation. Or maybe he was just the 16th president. Maybe the history books imply certain things or exaggerate certain things about who he was and about what he accomplished or about the time frame in which he did so or how he lived his life. Maybe. But do I think that a group of elites behind the scenes made up the person of Abraham Lincoln and somehow got this fictitious person elected president of the United States in order to make a whole lot of money and save the country? Probably not. I would give that like a 0.002% chance of being real. But there's a Facebook group about this theory, and there are people who believe this. And I thought it was pretty bizarre and pretty funny and worth sharing on the show for that very reason. Because we like to share the bizarre. We like to share the funny. We like to talk about conspiracy theories because sometimes conspiracy theories are real. Because all it means is a group of people have conspired together to cover something up or to do something. And that happens every day, all the time. But in this particular situation, I think probably these folks is just crazy. That's all for this week. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. I can't either. It's back in the house and out of the shed for me. Thanks again for listening to episode 28. Make sure to subscribe, like, share, and review. It really does help. If you have any paranormal experiences, opinions about sports, or politics that you'd like to share, you can email the show at intheshedwithwes@gmail.com. Again, that's intheshedwithwes@gmail.com. I might even read it on air. Look for us on Spotify, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, or wherever you listen to podcasts, and make sure to follow us on Twitter at InTheShed4. Tune in again next week when we'll hit the headlines, talk some sports, and learn together the eerie story of Jeff the Talking Mongoose. This has been In the Shed with Wes Anderson, the best news show in the land covering politics, sports, and the paranormal. Have an adventurous and fulfilling weekend. I'll catch you tools later. Peace out, Boy Scout. Memaw, we made it!